When I was in college, I worked for a local hospital, one of the largest in North Georgia area outside of Atlanta. I won't name drop because they probably don't want to be mentioned, but this hospital was huge. I'd worked clerical jobs in a few other hospitals. You could have easily fit 3 of my previous facilities into this place. That being said, it was a mismatched monstrosity of old and new. The new medical promenade might have been a modern architectural marvel, but areas like the ER and the admin hallway still looked much like they did in 1972. It's a place at war with itself, constantly changing, but also constantly staying the same. Probably why there's so many ghost stories connected to the place. Working at the front ER desk, I came in for a lot of rumors, especially since I worked the night shift. Security has an office in the ER since it's where the biggest train wrecks usually happen. This meant that Carl, the night watchman, would usually wander over to hang out and watch YouTube videos when I'm not checking in on people. David, the late shift maintenance guy, and Mark, the 11 to 7 switchboard operator, are also pretty likely to come hang out if the night's slow and they're on break. Between the 3 of them, I've heard all the good stories from all hours. Some of them were kind of funny, like the nurses Carl walked in on screwing during a security check, or the handsome ER surgeon, Dr. Logan, who cried to Mark for 3 hours while he was stuck in an elevator that had stopped working. I mean, these stories were fun, but they inevitably led to stories about the hospitals, the haunted areas, and the weird occurrences they sometimes witnessed. Some of them were clearly bullshit, like David telling me that his ladder had disappeared from the 44th stairwell and appeared on the roof. But some of them were too weird to be pure fiction. Certain areas of the hospital were definitely more active than others. Places like the South Promenade, where a girl had jumped to her death from the 4th floor railing. David claims to this day that he watched a shadowy figure drop to the tiles a few times. And the look in his face makes me believe he probably wasn't lying. Then there's the matter of Mark's phantom phone calls every night. Mark claims he gets at least 4 phone calls from the courtesy phone on the 3rd floor, every night, between midnight and 4 a.m. Caller never says anything, but Mark's sure he could hear a little whisper under all the static. One night, he recorded the noises on his cell phone to let a friend listen to it who's into paranormal stuff. And when his friend had processed it through a computer program, the caller said, "Jackie and baby in love." But the rest had been gibberish. It happened at the same wee hours of the morning every day. Mark had even sent Carl up to the phone a few occasions to check for people playing jokes on him. Carl had reported the phone wasn't even plugged in. Yet the phone calls still came. Then, of course, there was Shaky Leg Mary. Many members of the hospital had seen the entity known as Shaky Leg Mary. She's been seen in the ambulance bay in the ER, in the pass-through hallways where she was wheeled into surgery. Most often, she was seen wandering the OR hallways after hours. She had been a headless woman that had been run over in front of Mary of Mercy one night long before I was hired. Her skull had been crushed, her lungs mostly collapsed, and her left leg was a tangled mess of bones and flesh. They had rushed her to the ER as quickly as they could, but she died on the table as they tried to operate on her. She had made frequent appearances after that. So when Carl came staggering up an hour ago looking starry and pale, I knew he had seen something. I figured he'd had another situation with a combative patient, but it turned out to be a little worse than that. "I saw her," he whispered, like he was afraid to say it out loud. I looked up from my YouTube video and I clicked pause after one look at him. "Saw who?" I asked. "Mary," he said. "Shaky like Mary. I saw her in the surgery hallway." I told him to tell me the story, and he shakily obliged. Carl had been doing his rounds, as he usually did, when he saw her. He had come through the surgical center, checking doors and making sure everything was secured. It was 3 a.m. and he was making his way briskly about his appointed route, so he could stop by the cafeteria and get a cup of coffee before heading upstairs to continue. All he had to do was cut through the surgical OR hallway, check the operating room's doors, and he'd come out next to the cafeteria. He had opened the door, and that's when he had seen her. She'd been standing in the hallway, her back to Carl, and he had pulled out his flashlight to shine it at her. He was just about to yell at her, tell her that this area was restricted, when he finally noticed her leg. It was twisted up like a bent signpost, and he watched as it flexed weirdly beneath her. Her hair was dark and oozed with something pink and viscous. Carl swore he could hear her breathing, ragged. Her air hitched in oddly as her deflated lungs tried to pump it. The bulb popped when he dropped his flashlight. The sound made her turn, and her squashed face looked like a ruined jack-o'-lantern as the bulbous eyes stared blindly in his direction. "She was as far from here as that water fountain," he told me, pointing to a fountain that was about 30 feet away. "But that leg didn't stop her from coming after me." Carl said she hunkered down onto all fours like a dog and charged him grotesquely. Carl backpedaled, trying to run, but tripped over his feet and had fallen onto his rump at the least opportune time. She was gasping and closing in on him, jaw opening weirdly in a mouth that was mostly broken, when Carl thought to close the door between the two of them. He kicked out shakily and slammed the heavy door shut. Just as she was about to jump on him, she hit it like a cannonball and then screamed like an angry wildcat. As he sprawled there, panting in the lighted hallway, he heard her slamming into the front door 6 or 7 times before he found his feet and ran somewhere he knew there would be people. That's what had brought him to me. Carl later got David to agree to go with him to make sure that it hadn't been some homeless person who had wandered in and was trashing the place. The two of them turned all the lights on and explored every OR room and the storage closet. But they didn't find anything but surgical equipment and cobwebs. She had disappeared as quickly as she had arrived. But they did bring me to that door to show me one thing she left behind before I left for the night. David showed me a heavy indent on the OR side of the door, one that had left a deep mark in the metal there. "Door's a bit bent, too," he said. "So I'll have to fix the track on it before the week's out." Though, he was emphatic about the fact that he wouldn't fix it after dark. Carl never went to the OR hallway again after hours. And the legend of Shaky-Legged Mary continues to grow. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta. For those of you guys who are following me here on YouTube, thank you so much for watching as we get closer and closer to the Halloween countdown, and thank you so much for hitting that subscribe button. And for those of you who are listening on Spotify or anywhere that the podcast is listed, hey, thank you for subscribing to me there. Be on the lookout at the end of September. I'm going to be adding a couple of new links to the description of a very special thing I have been working on with Makeship. Be expecting it September 30th. I'll probably have a whole video announcing it. I'll probably have a whole set of new outros also talking about it, but get hype because this is something I'm super excited about, but I don't want to ruin what it is. Just speculate. Mention in the comments right now what you think it is, because it's you probably have it. And like always, I want to give a very big special thank you to everybody who supports me out on Patreon, patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. You guys, as always, are the real MVPs. And I'm talking about you specifically, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Brian Ace, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Reaper61167, Alex the Sandwich, Darth Miver, Micah Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Ness69420, aisodoehtraed, Nessie, BardoHawk764, Ferb, Harley, Madam Skullbunny, Sashi Sazaku, at grizzly_olsen.pro, Kayden the Spooky Boy, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Ashwood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Miss Exandra, Mr. Unsettling Spaghetti, Spaghetti, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Fried Chicken 12, James Bruce, Freddy Krueger, Ty Nanny, Michael Scarborough, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiwi the Sloth, Tommy Green, Festal Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nina Smith, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. You guys and everyone on this list of names that I can't pronounce, and everybody in the description down below, and everyone who supports me on Patreon who doesn't get those things but also supports, I love all of you. Thank you guys so much. Stick with me, cause Halloween's a-comin', and sweet dreams.